We're there.
Hi, welcome to Leadership from the Heart. How are you guys?
Leadership from the heart. Yay.
This is what you have to do. Okay, I'm very excited about today, but I also have to say I'm a little nervous, and you'll understand why later, especially because somebody just disclosed they have notes that they took for our conversation. But I have the honor and privilege of introducing Debra Moerke. Debra, there's not just one thing that Debra is. It was fun. There's lots of things. So I'm going to kind of give you an overview, and then I'm going to let you jump into whatever you feel like talking about with us today, okay?
Sure.
All right, so Debra Moerke is in Casper, Wyoming, and she owns a real estate brokerage up there called Stratton Real Estate. How long have you had Stratton?
Almost 10 years, but in real estate, 15.
Yeah, okay, so long time. Casper is a very small town. But some of her backstory is she was a foster family, and they had over 180 foster kids in 20 years. She was Mrs. Wyoming. Renee, I don't know if you know this.
I don't know that. Mrs. Wyoming.
Yes, you were married, and she had long blonde hair, and she went through the whole thing, which if you know her, that's so not like her. Mrs. Wyoming, and then from there, she also was she was a counselor for a women's crisis pregnancy center. I mean, like, she's got so many things on her resume. But then Mrs. Wyoming goes and works in one of the toughest prison systems in the nation as a prison guard. Like, her story is pretty amazing. And so, and then from their foster family, she's written a book. She's always been a writer. She's an amazing author, and we've always told her to publish her books, but she finally did. And so she is now a published author of Murder, Motherhood, and Miraculous Grace. So I want you to talk about that. But her greatest accomplishment, okay?
Here it comes.
Her greatest accomplishment of all times is that she gets to be my mom.
Oh, welcome, Debra. That was the most epic intro ever.
Yeah. Hi, Mom. And Jill says, hi, your favorite daughter, Jill, is watching. So
I saw that. Yes.
Hi, Jill.
So I'm super excited you're on here. I will say I'm a little nervous. You promised you'd be on your best behavior.
I will.
But I also know you, and probably behind your back, you have your fingers crossed. So,
she's so funny.
Welcome to our show.
Well, thank you. And, you are, of course, my most humble daughter of all of our children.
Yeah. I'm your favorite oldest.
And the favorite oldest. Yep, you are my favorite oldest. She is Elizabeth's the oldest of 6. So she was my guinea pig. And, you didn't turn out too bad, really. I'm kind of impressed.
Good job, Mama.
Yeah. No, you're great.
But tell us, so I'm kind of joking, sort of, but I mean, you do have an amazing background, and it's funny because when people meet me and they are like, how do you do all these things? And you're Wonder Woman, and I'm like, no, I'm not, but maybe, and I'm always so busy, and I say I thrive in chaos, and I think I learned that from you.
You did.
But in all seriousness, you have an amazing background. You have an amazing story. You're a gifted teacher. You're a gifted speaker, gifted counselor. But tell us in your words what you would like us to know about your background and who you are.
Oh, about my background and who I am. Well, I guess I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. So that's probably, kind of difficult to even focus in one area. To me, life is a candy store, and it's just, I just want to try a little bit of everything. In fact, coming up, I've said that one thing on my bucket list that I've asked both of your brothers who are in the military, Elizabeth, to do with me, and that is to parachute out of an airplane.
You're crazy.
So we are looking at doing that this summer, hopefully together. And so there's just exciting things in life to do. But I think one of the most exciting things in life really are people, just dealing with people. People are challenging, I think, as we all know, but people cause us to grow. And I think of all of the years of having foster children, I really learned a lot about not only them, but about myself and parenting and there's a lot of challenges that go into that. Not to say there weren't challenges in raising my eldest favorite daughter either, but there were also challenges with children that are really coming from rough backgrounds and from situations that they just really have no clue what discipline and love and affection and guidance look like. So that was one area and period of time that I think I grew a lot and I learned a lot. And there's negatives and there's positives in foster parenting, and I think we experience them all. And but it's not something you know until you get into it. You just don't know until you really get into it. We didn't have anyone that really gave us counsel or a heads up on what that was all going to look like and how to do it, way back when. There's probably better training now. But so the book that I wrote recently was from a very tough situation out of that foster parenting. But I also shared in the book some of the really positive things, and wanted to really encourage other people. And so I've always wanted to, as far as moving forward in any kind of leadership, whether I'm speaking at a women's retreat or when I was the director of the crisis center, I not only had to train our own center, but I went to some other states. They asked me to come and train their center as well. And so I love teaching, I love training. But I think if somebody were to ask me, really, what is my, how would I sum up what kind of a leader I want to be, and what do I look for? What quality do I look for in other leaders? Where my heart's at is being a servant leader. There are people who they want to lead, but they want to lead with, a tough fist, and they want to lead because they want power, or they want recognition. And I really think that a good leader is a servant leader. And I believe that what it is that purpose of that servant leader is to help train other people to be servant leaders, not just leave it to yourself and isolate yourself. So that's been really exciting to me, that I've, through many years, have been able to go into situations and be a trainer for other people. And just like as I'm so excited when my daughter achieves all the incredible things that she achieves, because she's so smart and just incredible. And she knows, I think she's incredible, because she is.
You're right.
But
I agree.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people agree on that. But I think it gives us all joy when we are a person either in training or mentoring or teaching someone else, or leading or guiding, or however we do it. And we see them being successful because of our investment in them. That's what I really get excited about.
So, it's funny, I know so many things, and I'm starting, even just with what you said, I'm starting to kind of see, and as I've grown older and I have kids and, all these different things, one of the things that really stands out to me, what was the prison in Arizona? It's a famous prison that you were a prison guard in.
Well, it was really a county jail, and it was under Joe Arpaio.
Yeah, famous. He's famous. Have you heard of him, Renee?
I have not.
He's very well known. Well, he was very well known for how he ran his jail, and he had tent cities.
I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah. And they were in Arizona. They literally tents, and these inmates were out there. And it's not this women's jail. This was a women and men jail. Mm-hmm. And so Wes and I went out there to visit her. Yeah, we went out there to visit her with my dad, and we're like, oh, this is gonna be fun. And again, Mom was just Mrs. Wyoming, like this cute little blonde, and here she is walking down the hall with inmates in uniforms, and she's packing her gun, and we're like, what are you doing? And these women.
What prompts a transition like that?
That's what I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to let her answer that. But then we're looking in, and I'm not going to lie, it was scary. And she's just calm as a cucumber. And so I'm just like, what are you? In fact, my husband, remember, he took you by the shoulders and he shook you. He was like, what are you thinking? And Dad even goes, I'm wondering the same. Right? But all these women, like these hardened criminals, these mean looking women, right? Like Mom would walk by and they would calm down. And even when she'd go in their cells, she had her own little cell within her cell to keep her protected. Mm-hmm. And do you remember when we asked you, why do you do this? Do you remember what you told me? This has stuck with me for years.
I don't.
You don't remember what you told me? You turn around very calmly with that smile that you always give us, where I'm like, okay, she's going to speak wisdom or something. And you said, I just want to be a light in a dark place. God wants me to be a light in a dark place. And we're like, well, I mean, yeah, you're all engaged.
Wow.
But the way these people and these women would respond to my mom, like, it was eye-opening. And so, I mean, when you're talking about servant leadership and leading, like, to Renee's question, what made you can be a light in many dark places. What made you decide to go that route? What was that journey like?
Well, to be honest with you, I hadn't thought about it in years prior. You know, for many years I was a foster parent and then the director of this crisis center. And then I became a local jail chaplain. And then I was asked to speak at our women's prison in Wyoming twice a year with a Christian organization. And so I just obviously began to see that there's this thread, you know, through everything that I seem to be drawn to. The foster children I had in my home, many of them were in jail or prison. There was women that came to the crisis center who, you know, were in abusive relationships or situations, and maybe they had a spouse or a boyfriend that were in prison. Some of these women would end up in the local jail, and I would go and visit them as a jail chaplain. And so when we moved to Arizona and transferred there with Dad's job, I was actually going back to college because I wanted to be a prison chaplain, and I needed to have further education in order to be a prison chaplain. And so while I was in the class, and it was at on Luke Air Force Base, Wayland Baptist University, on that Air Force Base, everybody that took classes on there were either law enforcement or military. So I was one of the very few. It's just because I lived by there and I was allowed to go in. So I met some people that were in the law enforcement. And it's, you know, we have Elizabeth has a sister, a daughter of ours who has fought cancer much of her life. And during that time, she was diagnosed again, and I thought I was going to need to quit going to school. And she said, no, Mom, keep going to school. And I said, well, I need to get a job, you know, and help. And it turned out one of the gentlemen in my classes, when I asked for prayer in that class, he said, have you ever considered working in our jails? And I thought, oh, I've been in the jail many times and prison, but as a chaplain. He says, no, I mean as an officer. And I kind of chuckled and thought, well, no, not really. You know, I kind of went from little black pump shoes and a little dress, as you said, you know, in women's ministry, and going, no, I never pictured me with a badge and army boots. But he said, he goes, well, I will give you a letter of recommendation. I've come to know you. And I'm thinking, who are you? You were just a guy in my class. And he said, no, I'm the captain of one of the jails here. And so I went home and told the family, and they all laughed. And then I started thinking about it because Elizabeth knows me. It's scary. But I thought, you know, that would be another perspective. And I wanted to have the perspective as a chaplain. And I thought this would be a great perspective as an officer. The only position I didn't want to experience was one as an inmate. So fortunately, I have not done that yet. But I just thought, let's do this. And I would get a real feel for, you know, be in there 8 hours a day, mixing with them. The dorms that we were over, as women, were over 150 women in one dorm, one officer. And like she said, Elizabeth said, this one jail in Phoenix. And Phoenix jails are some of the roughest in the country. But it was split into different wings. And one section was men and one women. So even as female officers, we worked the male towers. And that's where I gave Elizabeth and her husband Wes a tour. And there's all of those guys hitting on the windows and trying to scare them. And I was telling them to go sit on their bed. They're being naughty.
You know? It worked. I was fearful. Yeah. And again, you're the one that had the gun. You were fine. But yeah,
how many years were you there?
About 3 years, a little under 3 years. And then we transferred back to Wyoming.
What does 3 years in that type of role teach you as leaders and in your leadership skills?
Well, you know, that's a whole other level of learning because I had to go through training, which was really a boot camp. So I was in my mid 40s going into boot camp with all of these young, you know, 20-year-olds and whatever, trying to keep up with them. And I learned pretty early on, physically, I was not going to be able to take down some big guy, you know, or whatever. So I really my leadership role in there, I learned to really gain respect from them, the men and the women, by how I treated them, how I spoke to them. And I have a very strong faith, and and I depend on it, believe me, all of the time. But I had different prisoners making comments to me at different times, and one of them said to me, Officer Moerke, a lot of the other officers yell and scream at us and call us names and all that, but you don't do that. You always talk to us really respectfully. So they said, how come you're so different? And I just said, well, because it's more about of who I am, not who you are, So I said, I will treat you respectfully. Number one is because of who I answer to, which is higher than, the captain of our jail. And I said, so I feel I have a responsibility of how I present myself. But I said, but how I treat you is based on who I am, not who you are. I treat you all the same and respectful because you're people. But I said, I will tell you this. I will always show respect to you, even if I have to take you down, spray you with pepper spray, cuff you, or put you in lockdown, but I'll do it respectfully. So that was my philosophy and leadership in the jail.
I'm curious. So 180 foster children, right?
Well, there was not quite that many. Elizabeth just probably feels like there was 180.
I thought somebody told me there was like 100, and there was a lot.
There was a lot. There was close to that. Yeah, there were, and we took them from all different situations.
Can you bring us back to the first foster child and what that decision looked like in your family?
The first foster child was, which is very interesting, was a little boy, if you remember Elizabeth, and he was from an Indian reservation here, actually.
His name was Gentry, and we thought his first name was Gentry, and it was his last name, and he never corrected us, so we always called him by his last name.
That's right. But that's right, Elizabeth, and you remember that. And so he was our first one, and his mother was Native Indian. Birth father, I believe, was not. So that was very interesting to us because he was a very sweet little boy. But we had to deal with not only social services, but we had to deal with the Indian nation, and they have their own rules and government and everything. And so that was a very interesting first time out of the gate, with the child. But we've had children that, and then Elizabeth would take the little ones, the babies, under her wing, as always. I've got to tell that story. And because this is part of Elizabeth's character. This little baby came to us. His name was Larry. She did not think that he looked like a Larry,
Who names their baby Larry?
I know, that's what she said. So she decided to rename him Sloan.
How old were you, Elizabeth? How old was she?
You were what, maybe 11 or 12, were you? Or were you about that?
We got Gentry when I was in second grade. Yeah, probably 11 or 12. He was the first baby that I was able to convince Mom to let him be in my room.
Yeah.
But yeah,
she took care of him.
Better than Larry, yeah.
Yeah, she loved him. You loved him. But that was so funny because the caseworker would call her something, and I would refer to him as Sloan. And she's like, who's Sloan? Oh, Elizabeth renamed him. So that's part of Beth's character. You don't like something, then you just change it, fix it, make it right, do it. So, but yeah, we had babies. We had them from, the youngest we had was 4 days old, and the oldest was 17, and all in between. And so, and that was good. We also there was a school for the deaf here in Casper at the time, and I taught sign language at our local recreation center. And so my kids knew some sign language, and Elizabeth still does. And we took deaf students in, but that was more like that was a temporary thing. They were just there to go to school. They weren't in foster care. So Elizabeth knew how to yell at another kid in sign language. So you better be careful. She gets mad at you.
Well, let's see that. I think we need to see a little example
of Elizabeth. Nope. Go for it, Elizabeth.
Yeah. Nope, I'm not in. No, this is not signing from the heart. This is leadership from the heart.
I think one of them was like this. Wasn't that one of them?
Yeah.
I just remember. Isn't this more?
Yeah.
That is one of the things I want to do. Is I want to get my interpreter's license and work with the deaf community in real estate. It's just, it hasn't happened yet.
That'd be great. And I have handled some deaf couples in real estate. It's very challenging, but it's really rewarding. Yeah.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Okay, I have a question for both of you. I'd like you both to answer.
Okay.
This is not about I'm not on the hot seat.
Yeah. Okay, so with you pouring so much love and attention and care into the foster community and fostering so many children, what do you learn with your leadership skills through that process? And I would like you both to answer that, because you have the mom and parent role, and then you have the foster sibling role. Debra, you want to go first?
Elizabeth, do you have anything on the top of your head?
Well, I mean, for me, one thing mom used to say is we have a lot of love to give, right? And so me growing up in that environment is very different than me now looking back, right? So if I'm being completely honest and transparent, growing up in that, it was chaotic, right? And I was the oldest, right? And I'm the guinea pig, and mom trying to figure out my relationship with mom, and I'm a preteen, and like there's all these different dynamics going on. And we had younger kids, but we had high schoolers, right? And the high schoolers aren't making good decisions, but I'm going to do whatever I can to get that attention and be a part of something. So from that standpoint, it was not good. Hold on. Sorry, mom, you're going to have to take.
Okay, so mom, Debra, talk to us about your journey and what you learned with leadership. I mean, I would say what stands in my mind is you must have the patience of a saint. Like you need patience and so much love.
You need a lot of patience. And I think it's one thing that it's tested all of the time. I think that looking back now, being a foster parent, one of the big reasons for doing that, my husband and I talked, and we did say, we have love. We don't have a lot. We're kind of modest, economically, as far as our economics, we're a modest family, but we have a lot of love and we have a home. And we just saw that these children in our community, some of them were just in really horrible situations. And we thought that we could step in and help. So the pros and cons of that, as far as in the leadership, in one sense, we're trying to help these children. In the other sense, trying to teach my own children to think about other people, to care about other people, and to be concerned about them. And that's a really tough balance, because you're trying to teach your children to care about others, to serve others. And yet in the meantime too, they need their mom at times. They want her attention, my attention. And so it's a really tough balance, because you try to do both and show your kids and remind them. So I always tried to make sure, if there was a birthday, a celebration, a something, a dance, whatever, that would make the biggest fuss again about my own children, always wanting to put them first. But that doesn't mean that in that situation, they always feel that way. Yeah. And so it's definitely, it's really tough. And I think you'll find that in any family that is fostering children, or even exchange student situations. You bring another person in, and in some cases, the other children, your own children, love it. One of my sons said he always liked it. He always had a kid to play with, closer to his age, or maybe a boy, because his brother was 10 years older than him. So there were a lot of pluses. We have funny stories. We also have family stories that we promise not to ever tell, but we have some really good memories. And yet we also have some bad ones. We have some sad ones. And so as far as with leadership in that, I think trying to teach my children just that going through life and working through good and bad, and working through who are you serving? What is your purpose? And sometimes, even in a business, if you have an office, there's people you're going to give more attention to maybe than others at one time or another. We can have conflicts. It's sort of this natural thing that people go through. So leading, especially leading a group of people, whether it's your children in a family, or you're in a business, or you're in an organization or a church function, whatever it is, it's challenging because you're dealing with all these different personalities, perspectives, maybe age groups, emotions, backgrounds. So it is not easy to lead through that. And it's almost like you have to just stay stable, whoever you are. You can't make yourself be something different for every single person, or you can't do it. You've got to find what your course is, and you've got to stay on it. And there'll be those that are happy with you and those that are not, you know?
Well, maintaining that confidence too, one of the things that Elizabeth and I have talked a lot about, even over the last 60, 70 days specifically, is how we first even started Leadership from the Heart out of a conversation talking about our own apprehension on how to be a leader during this time that we've experienced. Of course, no one in 100 years has been faced with something like this. And now, looking back at the last 70 days, one of the things that I feel the most reflective of is I find a sense of peace today that I didn't have 70 days ago. And this is you have a lot to do with this, Elizabeth, and what we've done here on the show. What comes to mind is confidence. And it's finding confidence without having to know all the answers. But 70 days ago, inside, I was so nervous because I didn't have all the answers. And so now I think we've both kind of find this place where it's okay to not have all the answers. We can still navigate with confidence. Are you feeling that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody just today about that because I noticed something she wrote on Facebook and I could tell she was having a hard time. And I just picked up the phone. She's like, hey, what's going on? What do you need? I was like, I don't need anything. I'm calling to see what you need. Mm-hmm. And she said, I'm just really, because there's a lot of unknowns still, and she's a teacher and she's they only have one child. And so their challenges are very different than what I'm experiencing, right? And so I just encouraged her to stay connected, reach out. I mean, we're all a community, but I think some people forget that and they isolate. And you and I have been very fortunate because we did accidentally fall into this role, but you and I talk all the time, right? I talk to my tribe all the time. I encourage them to stay connected because that's really what's making the difference for me as opposed to what the alternative could be.
Right.
So go ahead, Renee.
No, go, Elizabeth. You guys are a lot of fun to listen to. So
yeah, I'm still nervous. I'm not gonna lie, because she hasn't.
Where are those notes from Debra? Let's see the notes about Elizabeth.
She hasn't pulled out those notes yet. So now, okay. So one of the things that you've always been great at is writing, and Renee talks about me as a writer. Mm-hmm. And when I can quiet my mind, I can write, and I love to write. But you are, and then maybe I get that from you, but you're a very, very good writer, and you've always written stories. When we were younger, she would write stories, and she wrote about the tree swing, and she wrote about Baldy Bean. Helen, my sister that she referred to earlier, that battled cancer a few times, and so many of the people watching probably know Helen's story, and Helen's also Kenzie's mom. Mm-hmm. And so they know kind of that struggle. But Mom, when Helen was battling, Mom wrote Baldy Bean, and that just was kind of a sweet little story about her. But she would never get anything published, right? And so now she went to this workshop. She started telling her story. She started writing her story, and all of a sudden, I mean, this is jumping in big time. This is not a cute child story, the tree swing, mm-hmm. right? You go in full bang with Murder, Motherhood, and Miraculous Grace. And so many people that have bought your book that know me, they're like, is this really true? Yeah. All of this? Yeah. And she left out a lot. And they said, why did she leave it out? I said, probably because it would be 3 times as big as it is. Yeah. What made you finally decide to be bold? Because that is being bold and putting that story out there. And I know as a family, we all talked about that, and some were okay with it being out there. I mean, that's just our story. Yeah. But that was a very, very bold move. And I saw you get a lot of momentum and speaking, and you're going all over the country. What made you do that? I mean, I know, but I want you to share. What made you to lead boldly in that way? And what are you doing now to pivot because you have so much more momentum and sharing that story in the current situation?
Okay. Geez. Well, the story in this, and there are some stories within that story too, but the main story is a tragic story, actually, and it's about one of our foster children that was returned home against what we thought was going to be safe for her, and we told the caseworker, and the ultimate thing happened, and that was that her mother took her life. She was only 5 years old. So this was a horrendous situation for our family. It affected us deeply, very much emotionally, but not only that, it was because we live in a smaller town. I was dragged in, to different things, court situations, and even with the birth mother of that child going to prison because I had access to the jails in prison. She wanted me to visit. I mean, there were a lot of emotional things that went on, a lot of decision making. And as I said, I became a Christian at age 33. I was not, a childhood conversion here or anything like that. And so, but I became a Christian at age 33 because life was just not working, trying it on my own. And so I really made a commitment when I made that commitment. And so part of this story was as I lived through it, and I really felt God walked me through it and saved us all through it. But then when we started getting, years out, 10, 15 years out, whatever, I really felt God was just putting a pressure on me, just saying I needed to share this story. It is a story of grace, and that's something we all need. We can all look back and say we made mistakes, and many of our mistakes we made when we were just naive, or we weren't experienced, or we just didn't know. And so we need to show each other grace. And there's a lot of, that's, why it's called miraculous grace. It was grace shown me by God. And he then again turned around and said, now I want you to show grace. And so that I couldn't say it was just a prompting. I felt it was a pressure that I finally realized I have to write this. But again, like Elizabeth said, I wrote my kids' children's stories to read to them at night. And we had a lot of fun with those stories. But to write a memoir of this horrendous situation, I had no clue where to begin. So the first thing was I went to a conference and shared the story with an editor there and writer, mostly for direction. Like, where do I begin? How do I do this? She was so taken back by the story that she, the next morning, she found me at the conference and said, and it was a Christian conference. She said she'd been praying about it, and she said, I have never, ever offered this to anybody at any conferences I've ever gone to. But she said, I would love to come alongside of you and help you do this. And she's the one, all the doors started opening. I got a top national agent. I got a top national publishing company. And it was just the doors open. So it was one of those things that, like Elizabeth says boldly, there are things that when I really feel God's calling me out to do, and it doesn't mean that I leave everybody happy with me, but I have a strong conviction that if that's what I am to do, that's what I am to do. Because I have a firm belief that I answer to somebody even higher than my children. As much as I love my children, they have their own lives to live. But I have to do what God wants me to do. So there are some people that are not happy that I wrote the story. Some in our family and some in our community. And I have to live with that because I knew that would happen. I knew that going in. I did not go into that naively. So there's a time, I think, when we take a leadership position and we know something is right and we're called to do it, we might have to accept the fact that there'll be some people that don't like us very much by doing it. But if we believe it is right and what we have to do, then that's my feeling is do it. Do it.
I know that there's been a lot of feedback positive. I've had a lot of people reach out to me too. Because hey, mom wrote this book. I obviously want to support it and I send out too, but not everybody says, oh, hey, I bought your mom's book. Until after they've read it, they're reaching out. They're like, we learned, and I took so much from that. And the power of grace. We talk about that a lot right now is during coronavirus and COVID and shelter in place, there's a lot of emotions going on. A lot of people are struggling in different ways and feeling guilty because, I keep joking that Lexi's going to fail first grade because of my homeschool teaching, which by the way, mom also homeschooled us at some point. I don't know how you did that, but I realized when I was fired by Tate that I'm not a very good homeschool teacher, but it's just all these different things and you feel guilty. You're like, oh, I'm not doing this. I'm not spending enough time. And it's allowing us to have grace, right? And giving grace to others. Everybody's handling this very, very differently. One day I might be great. One day I might not be, but we just have to have everybody just have allowance of grace for not only ourselves, but everybody else. And so a lot of people have reached out to me with your book, even before all this happened, because you do have a very, very strong underlying message on that topic.
That's great to know too. I think during this COVID time, you know, and being home, to tell you the truth, I've liked it. I've enjoyed it, you know, most of it, because it causes me to slow down a little bit and focus. And I've done a lot of Zoom meetings, but a lot of the Zoom meetings I've done, and like even with my church small group, or I belong to some writers groups, 2 writers groups, we're doing them. And then I have 2 of my best friends that live in Texas, and every morning we do Bible study together through Zoom every single morning. And so, you know, but to me, it's the connection. You know, it's like Elizabeth saying, it's reaching out to people. And even in my small group, doing little things. I went and made, you know, a lemon blueberry cake. And then my husband and I, we delivered it all with a little note in every bag, just hung it on their door, you know, went to their house. And so, I mean, you can still do social distancing and still love on people and just remind them that you care. And Elizabeth spent many, many years with me cooking meals and bringing them to people that were sick or having babies or whatever. We did that a lot and brought meals to people. You know, there's simple things that we can do to reach out and just to tell people that, you know, we care and that you're going to be okay. And Elizabeth does that a lot.
Elizabeth does that a lot. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I always compliment her on the way that she puts those finishing amazing details and touches on the way you serve in your business and all of your relationships. So I see that you've had great leadership in that department from your mom, Elizabeth. That's very inspiring.
Yeah, I blame her. Like, you know how I was telling you thank you notes? If I don't write a thank you note immediately, it stays in my head. That's her fault. Like, she would make us sit there and write thank you notes for everything all the time. And we complained and we hated it, but she trained us. And so now I can't not write a thank you note for something. So, you know, just little things like that you don't realize are tools in your tool belt moving forward. Mm-hmm. And like she said, cooking for neighbors and dropping things off. That's just something I do with my girls. And, you know, and it's just, it's a fun thing. And people appreciate that. And they're really surprised because not a lot of people do that kind of stuff. For me, it's just second nature.
I'm curious, Debra, you are so accomplished in so many ways, the way you've raised an amazing family, all of the wonderful things you have done. And now you're focused on a real estate business that you own. What have you learned with your whole journey put together? How does that then help you navigate as a real estate agent and broker of a brokerage?
Well, I am part owner with another one of our agents years ago. We bought the company. And so he is actually our managing broker, but I come alongside of him. We make the decisions together and all that. And so he, you know, I think what has helped in at least our real estate company, when we first purchased it, you know, here I had been a director of a crisis center, and he had come out of car dealerships for years. And so when we both purchased the company and we sat down and said how we want to move forward, we had the majority of the women, or the majority of the people, agents in our office were women. We think we had 2. Anyway, so he did not really know how to deal with the women. He say, they come in my office and they cry. What do I do with them when they cry? You know, he says, I'm not used to it. So he'd come across gruff. Then he would hurt their feelings, you know, and all of this. And so I said, this is where you and I really have to partner in our strength. And I said, first of all, you're dealing with women. He goes, well, yeah, but I've been in management for 20 years before this. I said, and who did you deal with? Who were most of your salespeople? Okay, guys, you know. So, you know, I think that part of leadership too, and being successful, at least in our brokerage, was, and Ken and I have done this now for about 7-8 years together, but we really had to take the first few years to figure each other out. You know, if you're going to partner with somebody and you want to lead together, you can't all lead from the same place and in the same ways, you know. So we have kind of a split leadership. There's times when there's something that's sensitive needs to be shared with our agents. He and I will have the meeting, and then he goes, okay, now you tell them. So, he just says, you can talk to them better. But he is the business brain, of our company. He handles that. So I really think that in leadership, it's really learning. You've got to learn about yourself and learn what are your strengths and weaknesses. And then if you want to be a strong leader, if you want to really incorporate something that's for the benefit of many, many people, I believe that you need to bring on those other people, either for counsel, or partnership or whatever, but maybe have the strengths that you don't have. And then you have to really, going back to grace, you have to show each other the grace to allow each other to blossom and flourish in your strength. Because there's just, to me, there's no room for jealousy in business. You're not going to be successful if you're going to try to manage together or partner together. You just can't do that. You can't be in competition with each other. You have to be in literally partnership to lead. And I think that's one of the things I've really learned with my brokerage. Yeah. But I did want to share one thing, if I may.
Yes, of course.
No, because I saw you look.
Yes. Are we? Is this under the column of Elizabeth notes?
It is. It is. No, I just, I was.
That's all I'm going to say. Paybacks.
I was looking at my daughter. I was thinking, making some notes too, of just her qualities and different things that I saw. That she's just, I think, good at investing in people and investing. I think she's a good investor in different ways. I think that she was called to real estate at a very young age, which I'll share with you in a moment. Also, she's very creative, and she definitely is service-minded. And so I'm really proud of her for all of those qualities. I think God gave her a lot of them, but she uses them, really well. And I'm really proud of her. But I think that
I knew there was a but.
Well, the one thing was, and she'll probably want to stop me as I go, but I just thought it was the funniest thing. We had a rule in our house that if you weren't home, for dinner, when dinner time was on, then you might just miss dinner. And so dinner time was on, and it was starting to get dark and whatever. And Elizabeth did not get home. And finally, after dark, she ended up wandering home, and she was pretty shaken. And I asked her what was wrong. And let's see if I have this story right. But she said that she and her friend decided that they could venture out and live on their own. Yeah. And so they got some things from food from each house, and they went out into the prairie. Remember, I live in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. And what they found was a big foxhole. And they brought their food and I think maybe a little blanket or a jacket, and they were going to go live in this foxhole. And that was going to be their new home until it got dark out in the prairie.
They realized that they were raw potatoes.
That's right. And she decided to wander home, come back home, and decided that, she was probably too young for real estate, and that was certainly not a home that she was really interested in staying, sheltering in place for very long. Mm-hmm. So she came home, but she was very adventurous, and she still is, and very, very creative. And as an investor, I think she invests wisely. She, as a young girl, about 11, maybe 12, saved all her babysitting money and invested in like these exotic fish. And so she had an aquarium in her bedroom, and she saved all her money, all her allowance and her babysitting money, and bought these exotic fish she was so proud of, and nobody was to touch her beautiful fish. So Aww. She went off to church camp one week, and asked me to feed her fish and take care of them. And all the kids went off to camp, of course, except at the time, our youngest son, who was about 3 at the time, about 3. Anyway, what he decided to do one day, unbeknownst to me, was he decided to get his other sister's little ceramic tea party set and lined them up, all the cups and saucers along the aquarium, and get the scoop, and took one fish at a time out and put them in the cups with no water, mm-hmm. and didn't tell me, and then left them. I guess it was a fish tea party until we found them, and Elizabeth came home from camp and about went for her brother's throat, who killed every one of her exotic fish. But I always thought that was really ingenious for as young as she was, for her to save all of her money to buy these exotic fish. And I think that today, when I go to conferences or few things I've gone to where she has spoken or she tells me about all of the wonderful, the different wonderful things that she's a part of, I think she's still just as creative. And I think that she just has that eye and that heart for some of those things that are really unique and really different. And I think that she takes that into her marketing. But I would just definitely tell her to avoid buying any exotic fish anymore. But I see her.
I think that was like 30 years ago with the fish, and I think I've just now forgiven my brother for that.
You know what I just thought of is when Debra's sharing the story of you going to the foxhole to live in.
Yeah.
Don't I seem to remember a video on Facebook not so long ago with Lexi, who was going to move out?
Oh,
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Generational.
Mom tells me all the time. She reminds Lexi reminds her of me, and I'm very nervous.
Yes, very much so.
Lexi's a firecracker, and that was one of the funniest videos ever. I'm moving out.
I'm moving out, and then she looks. Oh, it's dark. I'm moving out tomorrow, and goes downstairs. So.
I love that too. It was great. Yeah.
So, Mom.
Yeah.
It's funny because you talk about me being creative, and I do not see me as a creative type. And Jill, Jill,
yes.
Lee Knight talks about me being creative all the time, and she's had me see creativity in a different light. Like one of the things I love to do is connect people and just take care and love on people. And she's kind of shown me that that's a creative part of my personality, right? So creative is not like painting and crafts and things like that. I'm not good at. But I'm embracing that creative side of me in a very, very different way. So it's interesting to see how others see you and the perception. And if you listen, you can kind of learn from all of that. So anyway, I know we don't have a lot of time, but we ask everybody this last question, and I'm not, I'll be nice. I'm not going to ask any embarrassing questions for you, but what does leadership from the heart mean to you?
What does leadership from the heart mean to me? Well, I guess I would say to listen to your heart, that you can learn all kinds of things. You can learn, you can read all kinds of leadership books and go to seminars, and you can do all of this. But I believe that leadership from the heart is seeing a situation that's in front of you that you could really have some input in, that you personally can invest in. And when you do it, go all in. If you're gonna lead, put your whole self into it. But I would say that leadership from the heart means don't lead in a way that you're worried about what everybody else thinks or doesn't think. If you're going to be a failure, or if you're not, or if they're jealous of you, or any of these other things, you need to listen to what your heart says, and you need to go for it and do it, because I believe that's what that's what you're called to do. And if you don't do what you're called to do, I think it's going to make you a miserable person. So I would say leadership from the heart is doing what you feel in your heart that you're called to do, and do it to your best ability.
You're so awesome. Just saying.
You're very sweet. I have a very awesome daughter.
You do indeed. You do indeed. This has been such a wonderful time. Will you share with everyone, number one, make sure everyone knows where they can get your book, and then also how to contact you in all of their real estate needs?
Oh, and all our real estate needs? Sure. Okay. You can go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble to get the book. And it's called Motherhood, Miraculous, Grace. And so you can purchase it that way. There's, you can't get it here locally. You can get it here locally, but if you're not here, you can't get that. I work at Stratton Real Estate, and you can reach me at Debra, that's Debra, at realestateincasper.com. So it's realestateincasper.com, Debra Moerke. But just Debra. Okay.
Just Debra.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was nothing to be nervous about, Elizabeth.
No, now after the fact, no. But I also know my mother.
Oh, I didn't read all the notes.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's right. Too, though.
Yeah. Save those notes, because we're going to have you come back and we're going to dig into that, okay?
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm reevaluating my friendship with Renee Funk at this moment.
You both are darling.
I know that you were wondering why we would have you on.
Yes.
But I think that our viewers, and I think Renee also now knows a little bit more why. You've got an awesome story and you share a lot. And as your daughter, you know, I can take these things for granted. I'm used to you. And it's funny because when we were at this conference last October and somehow I left you unsupervised with my friends, which is never a good thing, right? They know all these stories. Yeah. Never leave my mom unsupervised. But I came back and then they were talking to me later like, oh my gosh, I mean, hours. And I'm like, really? And so it's funny because I'm used to you. Right? And so it's easy to take those people that are close to you or you know their story or that you love or respect for granted. But I mean, you have an awesome story. You do a lot. You're speaking all the time. You've changed a lot of people's lives. And so I think it was definitely fitting for you to be on here with us. And so thank you. We are honored.
So we're still related. We're still acknowledging each other and we still love each other.
That's still up for debate, but I'll get back to you on that one. Okay. No, we are humbled and honored that you came on and shared with us. And I think a lot of people will take a lot from that. And so I thank you and I love you. And I'm so glad to see you from here.
And I love you. And there's a heart for you girls.
That's right.
There you go.
Have a great day. Thanks for joining us, Debra.
God bless. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.